Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Wendy Leggett. I'm so happy you're here to share how you're shattering age related expectations for your own self and for others. How are you?
And fantastic. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to dig into this with you.
I know. Don't you love talking about this topic of pro aging and how exciting it is to age? I don't know about you, but I never thought I'd be doing this now. For so long, women have been, shh, don't mention your age, right? And now we're like, can
Yeah,
speak.
well, and even this idea of pro-aging wasn't flip the script for me because I always thought about anti-aging. We all do, right? We see products out there, anti-aging, fight it, resist it. And then pro-aging, it's like lean into it, make the most of it. We're here, so let's have at it.
Exactly. How many years have you lived and where do you hail from?
I am 67 years old and I was born in Colorado, grew up in Washington State, have been living in California more than half of my life now.
Oh, that's wonderful. Listeners, I will share a little bit about Wendy as we go along, but I'm going to let her talk about what she's been up to because she really does, with her business today, help folks with these Renaissance years in a wonderful, specific, holistic way. So often we're getting prepared financially and don't ever think about how do we want to be during this time period and who do we want to be. And Wendy is helping folks everywhere doing this, but we'll dive into her company, Conflicts Retirement Coaching, in just a second. But Wendy, I know that you have a story from your life or a little something surprising that you can share with us to give us a flavor of where you've been and who you are.
I think all of us, our lives are these mosaics of all these that kind of can be these disparate pieces, and then we pull it all together, and then there's this puzzle that comes alive. I think different story for me is that, and one of the things I've done in my life was I was a momager. So my twin boys were actually in a movie when they were like 2.5 or 3 years old, and so I was on set with them to have this bird's eye view into Hollywood was really quite different. The movie they were in called Baby Geniuses almost 30 years ago, but it was in the top 10 worst movies for the year. Like from a box office standpoint, it did really well. So it was quite an experience to be with my kids on set.
I bet, and a momager. How fun is that? And an eye-opening experience. And of course, they bring on twins because they need to give one kid a break and bring the other one on, and making sure your babies are okay and doing what they need to do and managing all the personalities. And hello, it's on-set life, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was really interesting, but it's an adult business, right? And here I have my little kids, and we were told it would be so much fun, and so signed on the dotted line, and then we're in the reality. And me as a mom is thinking, what have I done here to put my children in this kind of adult world? But I just brought in all kinds of games and crafts and all kinds of things for all the kids to do in between things. And I think that was kind of at that time, a little bit of a glimpse into who I am as a person, just trying
Right.
to really springboard into something else and make the best of what
And have they shared with you as adults what that time period meant to them?
I think it meant. Not really fortune and fame, but even now, they're both 30. On occasion, not as much now, but well into their 20s, people would stop them and say, "You are Basil and Baby Geniuses." It was just this little glimpse into something different, but they rolled with it and just
Uh,
thought it was so enjoyable and fun.
so here you are at 67. When you reflect back, right, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the images that we were given, Wendy, on how this time period was supposed to be between our parents and our grandparents, what thoughts and mythologies did you have about retirement and aging?
In my mind, that retirement was like, then you get to just do everything that you haven't had a chance to. And it's going to be that typical leisure and travel and endless weekends, which a lot of my clients and a lot of us out there, that's the belief that we have. So I
Yeah.
did look at it from that half full idea, but not really a clarity of how you get there. Uh,
Right.
that's where I've really been seeing that other side, that struggle, Andy, that so many really do have in retirement, that they're holding tight, like I did, to this vision that, wow, it's going to be stress free and everything's going to come up roses. And we know with all of our transitions in life, without planning, without a vision, without some stepping stones to get there, we might not really be able to reach that vision. So,
No, we won't be able to reach that vision. And given the longevity many are experiencing today, you may retire between 60 and 65 and live another 30 years. What are you going to do with that one precious life without having a conversation with someone? And listeners who tune in regularly, I'm going to bring up 2 points now. One, that is the World Health Organization's study in 2021 that pointed out retirement has become an epidemic because people end up sitting on the couch and they start to decline, both physically and mentally and emotionally, and end up costing societies billions of dollars. But also the lack of planning for a time that could be rich in other ways that we haven't thought of. And that's why I'm always a huge fan of helping someone pull out of you. No one's going to come up with a magic pill for you, but
yes.
someone like Wendy is going to help you discover or rediscover parts of yourself that you really hadn't had a chance to feed or nourish or experiment with. How long have you had complex retirement coaching?
About 6 years. So my background was in corporate leadership for quite a long time, and then I thought, I love the connection. I love elevating people's capabilities. I love achieving success measures, but I want to bring more of myself forward. And again, I started seeing this struggle in our demographic, in seeing that people, they'd step into retirement, and then when that honeymoon phase was over, which invariably it happens for most after 6 months to 2 years, then they feel like, wow, is this all there is to it? And so to your point, if you have 20 or 30 more years, I mean, that's a third of your lifetime. So much more that can be done, that can be experienced, that can be lived into. And so what is that? And that becomes a big question for people. And they feel like they need to figure it out on their own.
Well, and you had a unique window for many years into institutional ageism, which is how corporations have this mentality that is really not working, which is ambition dies when you're what, 45 or 50? And we're going to stop investing in our 50-year-old or even older employees.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Did you have any experience with that? Because today, Wendy, 7 out of 10 pre retirees are like, I don't want to stop working. I like what I do. I want to stay connected. I may not want to work a 40-hour week, but I can at this age and stage to get things done in 30 hours or 25 hours and be fine, but I don't want to stop. And so many of them are very nervous about going into their 60s because they don't want to be shut down.
Yes, so so vitally important because, I am a retirement life coach, but I don't advocate to retire. What I do advocate is to retire well. So make that decision, be intentional about it. And I really start off with how do you define retirement? Because so often people think of it as this, trophy or this badge of honor that I retired at such and such an age. And yet, what are they retiring to? What are they retiring with? What's the reason behind it? I've had some
Right.
clients come to me planning to retire, and as we start to work together, it's like they don't really want to retire. They're getting a lot of pressure to retire, and oftentimes not from the industry they're in, but from family and friends. And so let's be the CEO of you. Yeah, let's make those decisions ourselves and really decide what's meaningful for me. I talk about it as a retirement by design, not default. What is it for me?
And can we talk a little bit more about the pressure coming from family? Honestly, I hadn't even thought of that, Wendy.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have institutional society pushing you, but when family does, what does that look like? What does that sound like? And what happens when someone has those questions? When are you going to retire, mom, dad, family member?
Yes. Yeah. And really, it's retirement should be retired. I mean, that concept really doesn't really fit in our present times. It made very good sense back in the 30s. Social Security was brought on board because people were working in the factories, they were working in the fields, they were tired. And so they needed then some support financially to be able to then leave their careers. But people didn't live very much longer
No,
after
they
that.
didn't.
And now you and I have spoken about 20 or 30 years, hopefully. And so, what does that look like? And does it really constitute then leaving your career? And for some, it does. For some, it's I have this vision. There are these other things that being in my career are keeping me from being able to have the time, the freedom to do. But let's really envision that then. And let's look at the stepping stones. And do you have to leave your career? Or maybe you're planning to retire. I have some clients that come to me very planful. And as we start to work together, they determine I want to retire sooner. I can do that. And there's these exciting things that I have to look forward to. But yeah, you brought up corporate pressures, you brought up societal pressures, family pressures. And I just want to harken back to this idea that we're the leaders of ourselves. Let's take that accountability. Let's be that CEO of you and say, what do I want? Because when we come from that place of strength and clarity, then we can serve not just ourselves, but others. We can
Right.
serve those we love, serve our community, serve the world. But let's start there first. Take that responsibility and ownership.
And what do you suggest people respond? How should people respond when a family member says, "When are you gonna retire?" I mean, it's like, "When are you gonna have a baby?" You know?
That is such a great parallel. Yeah, that's really true. And so I think by having that strength in self to say, I, I, I'm not hearing that message yet, but I'll let you know when I do,
Yeah,
or
I love
right
that.
now I'm doing everything that I would do, you know, at any point in my life.
Right.
So
I'll get back to you. I like
yeah,
that. And you'll be one of the people to know once I figured that out. Oh my gosh. And then I know some people whose parent, a beloved parent, had a sudden death in their 40s or early 50s. They're like, "Oh, I'm so retiring early. That is not going to be me." And so they do. And I've watched them. They've retired and they've traveled and they've got all this flexibility and they're having a great time. But then they realize, yeah, I need to do more. And I
yeah,
think it goes back to being on purpose, right? So you're when folks are faced when Wendy with the transition, right, from work life to this new life, how do you guide them into first just making that transition, right, to sort of redefining how they're going to be in this new time period?
yeah. I mean, it really does start with getting clear on that vision. And I think oftentimes the only vision we have is that I'm not going to be working and I'm going to have all this freedom. But we know that as human beings, we like to have some sense of structure. We need to know where we're that we're feeling like we're moving in a direction. And that's all about feeling purposeful. But this idea of finding purpose, the one and done, is not really as supportive as this idea of feeling purposeful and each day doing something that feels meaningful. So instead of purpose with a capital P, we think about a lot of little p purposes. And so how can we really infuse that and integrate that into our lives? So I really do work with clients about looking back at, okay, what lit you up when you were younger that maybe then got kind of cast to the side? Or how are you feeling about all of this right now? You
Right.
met people that their parents passed away and so then they retire. Those are really important emotions that we want instead to really reflect on and say, okay, well, what's this meaning for me? Those signals that our emotions give us before we get into action. So
Right.
those are the kinds of things that I do with clients is really define what does retirement mean to me? What feels purposeful to me? What are my values? How do I then transition as you're sharing into this next chapter? And one of the things that people oftentimes when they retire do is they jump right into the new beginning, right into the doing, filling up their dance cards, getting really busy, taking a lot of the patterns or habits that they had in work and transferring them right into their retirement life. And so instead, I really invite people to stop and think about putting an ending. William Bridges is prolific around this work around transitions, as is Bruce Feiler. Both of them
Okay,
wrote
let's have those names again one more time.
William Bridges
William Bridges.
and Bruce Feiler,
Who
and
are
that's
they?
Feiler. Both are social scientists. Both have done a lot of work around transitions, and both of them have a similar concept in that we start with the ending. So we really look at where do we need closure? This is where some of those rituals are just so important, whether it's a going away party, a retirement party, if it's thanking all the different people that have been in your work life that you appreciate, if it's putting together a little album of your accomplishments, whatever it is. But having an ending and also really reflecting on what do I want to bring with me into retirement and what do I want to let go of? If we've been that classic workaholic, not that I like labels, but that's is that going to serve us as we move into retirement, or can we let go of some of what's this need to be busy all the time?
Oh
And
my
then from there, we then look at the second element of a transition, which is the neutral zone or the messy middle. And this is where we have some of those emotions, those feelings of stuck or confusion or loss or disappointment or anticipation or excitement, any number of emotions. But let's sit in that place. And I know that you speak to your listeners about this reflection time and really giving ourselves some journal prompts and digging deep and thinking, okay, so many people come to me feeling lost when they're moving
Right.
to retirement. And so what's that loss coming from? And so digging into that, or some say, oh, I'm going to fail at retirement. Where's that feeling coming from? And what constitutes quote unquote success in retirement? So we deal with then that second area called the messy middle before we move into the third, which is the new beginning. Before we get busy, before we
Oh,
start making commitments around volunteering or taking care of grandkids or starting a business. And it's not linear. We know that our lives kind of ebb and flow, but the concept here is still the same, where we start with the ending, we allow for those emotions, which I could talk to you for days about, dig deep with emotions, and then moving into that new beginning.
listeners, this is great advice for all of life, right? I am loving this conversation with this fabulous retirement coach, Wendy Leggett, and her company is called Conflicts Retirement Coaching. You can find the links in the show notes. It's conflictsretirementcoaching.com. Very simple to get there. You can find Wendy Leggett, Leggett, on LinkedIn. Be sure to connect with her. And this is so important that it's a transition. Just like we're very careful when we've lost a loved one, we understand there's a time period of mourning. There's no set calendar to how that works. It's the same thing as when you're transitioning, I believe, into this new stage in age, this taking
Yes.
the thoughtful time, especially if you're a high performer. When you get fed by all of that doership, it's
Yeah.
really hard to step back, but you have to honor, first of all, your age. And as we learned in prior episodes, our energy portfolio.
Mm.
So while we may have all these strong desires, we may not exactly have the physical or mental stamina for some of those things. And we all age differently. One of the things that frightens me, Wendy, is when I hear folks who retired to a 55 plus community and they're very busy. I've got mahjong and then I've got pickleball and then I've got book club. And I think, just kill me now. None of those things
Well,
ever,
and if
but they're very happy, but for
Yeah,
me, I
if
would I
it
would
works
just
for them, if it works for them. But I have had clients who have come to me with that lineup like you shared, and yet they say, wow, it's just this all there is to it. Am I going to be doing this for years on end? And they start to see or feel an emptiness or feel like a lack of that feeling purposeful. So then we really need to deconstruct and say, well, what is it about the busyness? And oftentimes for people, it is that relevance. It is saying I'm doing all these things. And so it is wanting to feel to the rest of the world like I'm being successful. But let's
a
get
contributing adult, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
and our identity has often been so entrenched in our profession. So
yeah.
when we leave that profession behind, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, well, who am I really?
Yes. Yeah. I talked about if you are what you do, who are you when you don't? And that concept that we are, it is so interwoven, right? And when we leave work, we can often feel like we're leaving pieces of ourselves behind. But that's where circling back and saying, okay, but I, who I am and who I've always been is still there at the core. And so, yes, sense of identity can get rocked. But if we can separate and say, this is really a role, my career was a role, my being a parent is a role because this happens for empty nesters too. They're all roles. We're
Right.
now a retiree, it's a role, but who we are inside and who we've always been is there. So let's clear out that clutter and get back to the core of who we are. And look at the skills and passions and capabilities that we have. We don't lose those. We're not
Mhm.
starting over. It's not a new book, it's a new chapter. We're turning the page, but we can always reflect back if we need to. And so let's build off of that strength. Let's come into that with pro aging and with that recognition that, hey, this is my time. It's a unique, exciting chapter. Let's make the most of it.
And I am valuable. And I am worthy to continue contributing, whatever that looks like. And I've got to stitch that on a pillow moment right here with it's not a new book, it's a new chapter. Where's my clappers? Got to get the clappers out for that one. That's so
Perfect
good.
clappers. Yeah, but it's true because people do sometimes lose themselves, you know? You've probably heard this too, that oftentimes people say, I feel invisible. And it's like, wow, where is that coming from? Because maybe the external world is telegraphing that to us, but we're receiving it. And so let's say, hey, that doesn't belong with me. I'm visible. What do I want to do to bring myself forward? Let's take that accountability that so empowering and so expansive for us.
It really is empowering and expansive. I love all of that. And
Yeah.
listeners, you can watch some YouTube videos and TikToks and read a few books, but honestly, when you hire someone like Wendy, she is going to help you not hide out. All right. She's going to ask you, where is that coming from? And you're going to have to pull on that thread
Mm.
because it's going to be so revealing. Might be a little work in there for you to go in and uncover some things that you might have wanted to just keep in a box on a shelf and never look at. But it's not like you have to go so deep to re-experience it, but to just understand where is that coming from and how do we dissolve that limitation so that you can move forward, right, Wendy?
Yeah, beautiful. And I think in the demographic that is kind of more that typical retirement age, Gen X's, baby boomers, that looking at emotions wasn't how we were raised. You know, positive psychology didn't come on the scene to 30 years ago. And
Right.
so because of that, we weren't raised with it. It's not woven into our DNA. When emotions come up, we were taught you push them aside or you push them down because they just weren't efficient. They didn't get us going, you know, moving forward. We're a highly productive, no pain, no gain generations. And so,
Yeah, stiff
we're
upper lip, everybody.
yeah. But yet we know that our emotions impact our thoughts, impact our beliefs, impact our actions. And so if we can look at emotions as just a signal that something needs more attention, and that's what a coach like myself does in a safe space, is allows us to surface them and then say, okay, what's this telling us and what else is needed? And so we can move forward in a much more empowered way as we're talking about, but also quickly, more quickly. You know, we're not wasting time. I've had so many people when I do presentations say, wow, I wish you'd been around when. And it's like, yes, ultimately, maybe they've gotten to a place of peace, but it took a long time and we can get some habits and patterns in place too that don't serve us. So I
That's
feel
right.
very strongly about surfacing those emotions
Oh my
and
gosh,
really,
and what you do is help people stay curious because a lot of times you're gonna pull on a thread, listeners, because you people will tell you, "Oh, you're great at interior design," or "You're great at cooking," or "You're great at," you know, some other incredible talent that you have. And you might like it as a hobby, or you might be like, "I don't care if I ever do that again. I'm really successful at it, but I hate it."
yeah.
You won't know sometimes until you pull on that thread and go, "Oh, I thought I'd be so happy at this, but I'm not." How do you help people forgive themselves for going down that rabbit hole and instead of saying, instead of blaming themselves for wasting time to say, "Oh, good, you found out what you didn't like and here's where we can go now." How do
Yeah.
you help them walk through that?
Well, it is that concept that was brought up by Carol Dweck around mindset. And do we have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? Do we feel that we're locked into place? And so now we did this thing and we didn't do quote unquote well at it. And so now there's not other options or bad on me. Instead of looking at it as failure, and again, I'm going to put it in quotes, is learning. It's
Right.
growth. It's allowing ourselves to step into an area that maybe is a little out of our comfort zone, because we know then that we're going to grow that much more. And sometimes that discomfort does beget then that growth. And so instead of people finding fault with themselves, no, we're going to celebrate what we learned. We're going to celebrate what we did accomplish, and we're going to celebrate even knowing what we don't like. And there's a lot of value in that as well, right? And so,
Absolutely.
but a cautionary tale, if I
Yeah.
may, is that instead of jumping all in, let's experiment instead. So instead of saying, oh, I'm in retirement, so now I'm going to volunteer all my time, or I'm going to take care of grandkids all my time, or I'm going to start a business. Let's put a toe in. Let's say, hey, I'll take care of the grandkids for an afternoon. I'll offer to be volunteering on a smaller scale. Try these things out, experiment, and then check back with yourself and say, how does it make me feel?
Right.
Does it feel purposeful to me? Does it check off some boxes for me? Or is it no, not really resonant? And so, okay, then I'm going to try something else. But instead of leaping into it, that new beginning right away, instead of some of that reflection and experiment.
Oh my gosh, this is such a great conversation, Wendy. I want to give listeners permission to let their children know that if you don't want to be the caregiving grandparent, it's okay. I've already told my kids, look, I'm really good at hiring. I love children. Don't get me wrong, everyone. But sometimes we can get pigeonholed into coming over and taking care of the kids. In fact, I actually hear a lot of my millennial friends talking about, hey, my mom is too busy to come over and help. And I know our grandmother helped her out all the time. What's up with that? You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I think it all comes from values, right? I mean, I'm hearing you share that, yes, you value being supportive to your kids in that way, but it's just looks different the way that you provide that support. So
and
I
it's
think it's
okay.
probably getting at that. It's so okay. In fact, it's just better for everyone because you're coming from that place of authenticity from your own truth. But the flip side happens too, where oftentimes people who retire assume that they're going to then be enmeshed in their kids and their grandkids' lives. And there's not a communication there about it. So there can be
Mhm.
assumptions. So
Right.
I think that's another area that's important, especially when we have significant other and family members involved, is gaining some clarity around our own vision and then communicating that and collaborating and not making assumptions so that we all continue to walk down the path together.
And Wendy, can we talk a little bit about intergenerational relationships? It's wonderful to have these relationships in different generations instead of just being surrounded by people of your own generation. How do you work with your clients in navigating that and creating meaningful relationships from all ages?
Yeah, well, we do work around relationships because that is a pivotal, really an essential building block for retirement well-being is this connection. We're social creatures and having people in our lives that we do feel connected to
Yeah.
is so vitally important. And yet, if it's this homogeneous group that's all of our own age, we oftentimes then are going to lose out on some of the things that are, new and happening and current in our world, or as we know our social circle, if we keep it our own age, is going to get smaller. Is that yeah, inevitably people were going to lose people. And so it's important even just for that reason to have that diversity of ages. But there's so much that we can share with one another at different ages and we can learn back. Bertha Brooks did a lot of work around this concept, right? About our fluid intelligence versus crystallized intelligence and moving from strength to strength. And so racially, we can bring all of that, and that can just be a beautiful synergy between
And
the
and frankly, Wendy, I just love getting the inspirational juice from someone young who's still, who's thinking about everything and their whole life is ahead of them and all the possibilities. I just get so excited. Wendy, one of the wonderful things that I've heard since I launched the podcast in March of 2024, folks, is that I've had so many 40 and 50-year-olds reach out to me, send me messages, DMs, etc., saying, oh my gosh, I am so excited about hitting my 60s, 70s, and 80s
beautiful.
now.
Well, give a clapper to yourself right now. It's awesome because really what you're providing is that runway. You're providing that opportunity to look at as we advance. not as a negative, not as something that we want to, resist, but instead just step into it. And so it's a beautiful thing. We all know we're going to get older. From the day we were born, we're getting older. So let's just embrace it. I know that you had Jeanette on your show and harken back for everybody,
Right.
you speaking about looking at age from a sideways view in her book. And there's just so much richness there to release ourselves around
Yes.
the cage around the
And being
age.
playful. I mean, I have a whole bunch of wigs I love to throw on and do funny things and be playful as we explore. But I gotta tell you, Wendy, you are the gift that keeps on giving. You are just a wonderful, wonderful resource for so many folks who I'm sure are haven't even really given that wonderful thought like you have, which is supporting their vision with emotional well-being, connectedness, an ongoing sense of contribution, all of those important things, and understanding the three pillars that you talked about, right? Which are just so important. Don't make this transition like boom, bang, bookmark done, right? No, be thoughtful, introspective, pull on some threads. That's where the magic lies when you take time, right, Wendy?
Yeah, that's the richness, that's the depth. Instead of, the transaction, we're looking at the transformation. Instead of the doing, we're looking at the being. I loved when I heard that saying that we're human beings, we're not human
Right.
doings. But it's something, can we take it to heart? And sometimes we don't have the pathways. And the things that Andy and I are talking about, yes, sometimes it's like, okay, you're aware that there's things lacking, but how do you then move in a direction? And that's where we can help.
Right.
And
Don't go it alone, folks. Time is our biggest asset right now. So we need to take the time to think about what we want to do. If we're gifted with another 10, 20, 30 years, it's that question Mary Oliver always asked, what are you going to do with your one precious life? It didn't just end because you turned a certain age. Wendy, I am so grateful that you came on the podcast to share your
oh,
wisdom. You are pure deliciousness. Any last words of advice to folks transitioning from being an employee or owner to this next stage in their lives?
I really want to impress upon all of us that we're the CEO of ourselves. This is our life to lead. And if we abdicate it to others, if we default to what society or family is telling us, then we're really not fully stepping into it. So let's have that retirement by design, not default, and gain that vision of what we want for ourselves and then the pathway to get there.
I love it. And how can folks work with you? Give us all the details.
Well, please reach out to my website. Thank you so much for noting it there. And you can click on a link and set up a discovery call with me. That's complimentary. Also, in the show notes, I think Andy's going to be putting a link to a little mini retirement workbook. We talked about doing little reflective exercises, and this allows you to really take aim. I call it taking aim on retirement, heightening your awareness, really setting some intentions, and then getting moving, making it happen. So that will step you through some of those. And, then let's have that discovery call and talk about what you found in those exercises.
Oh, this is so wonderful. Thank you so much, Wendy. And listeners, I am so grateful you tuned in. You are helping us crush ageism. You are part of this pro aging movement. And be sure to subscribe to the newsletter. Visit don'tbecagedbyyourage.com. Get on the list. I provide a recap every month of the episodes of the prior month, along with some resources in there that you can turn to. Be sure to follow Wendy everywhere she glows, connect with her on LinkedIn. And remember, you have so much to give. Don't let those internalized ageist beliefs prevent you from pursuing new dreams and opportunities. You can thrive after 65. There's so much that you have to give, and there's so much we want from you. The world still needs you. So until next time, I'm wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. Cheers from Boston, and thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you, it refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.